Okay, first things first, let's take attendance. So that is the attendance. These are the two attendance passports for today. So please take a minute to take attendance. In the meantime, I am going to I'm going to write a couple of things on the board. Okay, I hope you were able to take the attendance. Did it work? Okay, good. Let's see. The people on Moodle seem to be doing fine. Okay, so I suppose I suppose we could get started. Uh, okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to we're going to talk about Aristotle and friendship today, and then uh, and then next week we're kind of moving we're kind of taking a different direction. I'm going to have you watch we're going to watch this movie together next week, and then at the end of the movie I'll have people I'll have the movie is kind of long. It's about slightly over 2 hours, and so we spend all of Tuesday watching part of the movie, and then Thursday we'll finish up with the movie, and I'll have you think of some questions, answer some questions about the movie. Um, the so it's kind of a change of rhythm, a change of pace. The idea being that the idea being that sometimes you can get some interesting ideas about human nature and the human condition, not just by studying philosophy, but also by watching movies. Not probably not every single movie on earth, but some movies more than others. But for right now, for today, we are going to spend one more session on Aristotle by exploring Aristotle's views on friendship. Now the okay. Um, I was let me just before we actually go into the what he says about friendship itself, I should probably give you a sort of overview of what is going on. Why Aristotle would choose to talk about friendship among other things. Okay, so if you remember, right, going back to last week when we were talking about Aristotle, he did say, right, that the goal of human life is happiness or eudaimonia. And he says that being human beings who have to live among others, the surest way, the best way to attain this happiness is to practice virtue and become virtuous. And then we had a discussion about how to go about becoming virtuous. Now. So we had a discussion about how to go about becoming virtuous, and it turns out that being virtuous, you cannot be virtuous. You cannot be virtuous by yourself. A lot of the things that are involved with being virtuous, like courage, or justice, or moderation, all of these things are things that you get to practice by living with other people, right? Because, for example, if you never get invited to dinner parties, it is difficult to practice moderation. If you are never in a situation where you have to stand up to difficult situations, or practice standing up to other people, you won't get to become courageous either. So courage, moderation, and probably all of the other virtues, there are things that you can only become by living a life with other people in society. Which is why some people prefer to translate this term eudaimonia not as happiness, but some people prefer to translate it as flourishing, because when Aristotle talks about eudaimonia, he doesn't just mean being happy by yourself. He means being happy while you are living with other people. Being happy while you're living with other people involves living well with other people. And so some people would translate this same term not as happiness, but as flourishing. Um, so, okay, so where does friendship come into the picture? Well, the idea is that if you if you you know if you can only be virtuous, if you can only practice the virtues in by living with other people, then then friends are very useful for practicing virtue. In fact, he would actually argue that they are not just useful, they are actually you actually need to have friends in order to be to be virtuous, because you do need to you know yeah, because you do need other people. Well, first you do need other people in order to be virtuous and to be happy, and secondly, sometimes you need friends. Sometimes you need friends to get things done in the world. So, and it's not just that. It's also that if you meet the right kind of friend, if you meet the right kind of friend, then that friend would help you to will probably push you to become even more virtuous. So one example might be uh, the relationship between two people who are equally engaged in studying philosophy, right? So if you and your friend are equally engaged, equally interested in studying philosophy, your friend might your friend might help you to help to push you to understand philosophy better. And so in that way, you could, the friend actually helps you to become more virtuous. A friend could also, he does say somewhere that a friend could also act as a kind of mirror. A friend could act as a kind of mirror to maybe give you a kind of give you a feedback about what you are doing with yourself. So if you are falling into yeah, if you are falling into error, or if you are doing something that is not fully virtuous, your friend who is virtuous might actually might give you feedback and say and tell and says and critique you and say you probably shouldn't be doing that, and then maybe you will do that. So okay, but that's jumping ahead. He actually thinks that there are different kinds of friends, and then even among friends, well, it's complicated because there are three kinds of friendship, and then among these three kinds of friendship, there are also uh, notice that I haven't said we haven't really looked at what these three kinds of friendship are, but there are three kinds of friendship, and then in each of these three kinds of friendship, there is the equal friendship and there is unequal friendship. So it's almost like there are actually six kinds of friendship. Uh, each friendship has an equal version and an unequal version. Um, okay, so but okay, I should probably speak more slowly and and not jump too far ahead. Uh, now, um, actually, I was going to look at book 8, but I would like you to actually go back to the go back to earlier in the Nicomachean Ethics. So look at 261, page 261 of the textbook. Here here he actually talks about why it is important to have friends in the first place. So on page 261, in the right-hand column, near the bottom, he says that nonetheless, happiness evidently also needs external goods to be added. As we said, since we cannot easily do fine actions if we lack the resources. For first of all, in many actions, we use friends, wealth, and political power just as we use instruments. Further, deprivation of certain externals, for instance, good birth, good children, and beauty, mars our happiness. For we do not altogether have the character of happiness if we look utterly repulsive or ill-born, solitary, or childless. And we have even less, presumably, if our children or friends are totally bad or were good but have died. Okay, don't worry about there are a lot of details that aren't really important, but just think about what he says about friends here. So it looks like it looks like we need friends for at least two reasons, according to him. Uh, you know, first of all, as I said earlier, you need friends to get things done in the world. There are lots of things in the world that is very difficult or maybe impossible to get done if you don't have friends. And the second thing he says is that if you uh, if your friends are bad, if you have bad friends, then you probably wouldn't be happy. Presumably, the idea is that if you have bad friends, um, there are two ways that maybe I think there are two ways that bad friends can cause you to not be happy. The first way is that if your friends are less than virtuous, if your friends are vicious people, they might they might lead you down down the wrong path. They might present you with all kinds of temptations. And the second thing is that if your friends are bad, not in the sense of being vicious, but in the sense of uh, in the sense of maybe of being being very very poor maybe, or being very needy, then this then they might be a drain on your resources. Now that sounds a bit that sounds a bit mean to say, because it sounds like you're saying that you shouldn't have poor friends. Well, can you actually so can a wealthy person and a poor person be really be friends? Uh, hmm, he has something to say about this too. He says that sometimes, okay, I am like totally jumping over the place, but okay. He says that actually, when you have, two people who are unequal, so this is what we're talking about, being unequal. Okay, the three kinds of friendship, right? There are friendships that are based on pleasure, okay, and the friendships that are based on utility, and then friendships that are based on virtue. Now, if you have to, uh, you know, if you have two friends that are very unequal in wealth, one is very rich and the other one is very poor, I think most likely, I'm guessing, most likely most likely the friendship would be based on utility. Utility means usefulness. So, there are all these friendships that are based on whether the other person is useful to you in some way or other. So, they say it's good to have friends in high places. And the idea is that, well, if you have friends in high places, they are very useful to you. And maybe for the same reason, it is good. It may also be good to have friends that have a lot more money than you, uh, um, because they might help you out. But there's a problem here, right? Because if there is a huge, if the friendship is based on utility, and there is the huge disparity in wealth, then that means that one person, it would seem that one person is a lot more useful. One person is a lot more useful to the other than the other person is to you. So if I and Carlson are friends and I'm very rich and he's very poor, then you would think that I am more useful to Carson than Carson is useful to me. And that creates, well, it creates some instability in the relationship, right? Because one could argue that maybe this friendship wouldn't last for very long, because, well, because at some point I'm going to feel that this is very one-sided, and Carson is just using, he's just using me as a bank or something. Um, so yeah, so maybe, well, there are two problems here really. The first problem is that is it good? Is it good to have to make friends based on utility in the first place? And then the second problem is that if you make friends based on utility, and one person is much more useful than the other person because one person has way more money, um, uh, is that a bad thing? Yeah, is that a bad thing? you can probably tell that there are lots of things going on here, and I'm actually still, I'm struggling with a lot of these things here. Okay, so maybe I should ask you this question. Uh, if a friendship is based on utility, if if two people enter into a friendship based on their use for each other, like business friends or whatever, and one person is way more powerful or way more wealthy than the other person, uh, is that bad thing? Man?
I would say no, especially for the one that's less u- useful. That's actually a great position. But like, there's other ways that people can be useful, even if they're like, say, they don't have as much political power or as much um, money. But the way that you maintain that power is you have like if you're on top, and the way you maintain being on top isn't by sucking up to people above you. It's about making sure the people below you, you have favors with the people below you, and you can get people to do things for you. So that unstability kind of makes them dead. Like if you're friends with someone more powerful than you and they do things for you because they can, then you're in their debt. So the person's still getting utility out of them. It's just
Oh, right. You
like
so the person who's more powerful gets utility because he can call in the favors maybe when he needs them.
yeah,
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and yeah. So it's yeah. I guess there is something to be said for that. And I think Aristotle mentioned somewhere that that another way you can try to equalize the friendship somewhat is that the person in the inferior position could try to honor the person in the superior position more. I don't think he's just talking about sucking up or anything as crass as that. He's talking about maybe maybe writing a nice review about him or something. They didn't have Yelp at the time, of course, but you could do still, or maybe tell your friends about him and basically use every public platform that you can to tell everybody what a great guy he is, and so on and so on and so forth. Lacey, you're going to say something?
I was kind of just thinking, like, for me personally, I've seen instances where, like, two people are equal, and then one person, or are really good friends, and then one person becomes more wealthy, and then he no longer has not necessarily a use for his friend, but more so like they aren't in the same they just because there's a difference in wealth, they're no longer like they can't relate as much. They can't do as many things together because the more wealthy person can do more, whereas the other person, can't do as much. And I mean, I feel like a lot of the time that puts a lot of strain on a friendship, and so I think it is possible for them to still be friends, but it's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah, and I was thinking that another another reason, another way that the wealthy friend can make use of the not of the very poor friend is that uh, sometimes people choose to have they choose to have people of lesser wealth or lesser power around them, and it's kind of an ego thing, that that you can show to other people how great you are because you have all these people that kind of depend on you. Um, but that's yeah, I don't think that's a very good thing to do in the long run.
I think that I disagree with Aristotle in saying that the entire friendship has to be based on one of those things, because you could have like a friendship where one person's friends because of utility and the other person's friends because of pleasure. Like I thought of like the king and his jester. Like the king's like enjoys being around this person, and the person likes the protection that the king gives them.
Yeah, yeah. So that is actually is an example. I think that's actually an example of a relationship, or if you can call it a friendship if you want. It's basically a friendship that is based. I think it's based on both pleasure and utility. Because the king, right? Well, the king presumably gets a bunch of pleasure from from the jester, from his jokes and whatnot. But maybe he also gets some utility from him because maybe I imagine that when he has people visiting him, guests or whatever, maybe he uses the jester to entertain his guests as well. And of course, the jester. The jester gets utility from being employed by the king. Um, and in this case, I think it's relatively easy. It's relatively easy for the jester to, to repay the king to make it more equal, because there is a very clear. Well, the jester is obviously employed by the king, right? So there's very clear exchange of goods and services. Just basically, king gives the jester money and maybe room and board, and then jester gives the king, well, jokes or entertainment. So there's a very clear exchange of goods and services. But it's starting to look like it's based more on utility than pleasure. Um, but in most other kinds of friendships that don't involve employment, um, well, so suppose, right? Suppose I once this is something that might occur in a movie. I think there was a movie. I have seen at least a few movies somewhere that involve this kind of thing. So suppose there is a guy who's very poor, and he has a friend who is very wealthy. So they, but the friend, the friend kind of likes being around this guy because maybe because he's funny, or maybe he has some kind of you could imagine that maybe he has some kind of artistic talent or whatever. Maybe he draws pictures and starts to entertain his friend, and maybe maybe he's even able to maybe he's even useful in other ways, like maybe because of his talents. Because he's good at telling jokes and such, he might even be useful for entertaining the rich guy's other friends, right? So in this case, it's not a formal relationship employment, but there is some kind of unspoken exchange going on. So the idea is that okay, whenever we go out, I'll pay for everything. You in turn, it is your job to be to be funny, to be entertaining and all that. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe not so much. You don't see it so much here in Bocatero, but I wouldn't be surprised that in some big cities you probably have these kinds of friendships going on more. So there's a kind of the idea is that in order for friendship to sustain itself, in order for friendship to be sustainable, there must be an equal flow of there must be an equal flow of resources both ways, right? Rich guy gives money, the poor guy gives entertainment or whatever. So um, yeah, so that I suppose that might work. Um, um, the thing is that Aristotle would say that a friendship that is based on pleasure or based all on utility, they are kind of he would say that they are kind of accidental in nature, accidental or coincidental in nature. Uh, they are accidental and coincidental because they are accidental and coincidental because uh, they really depend on the presence of the utility and the pleasure. I mean, um, if for whatever reason, I'm no longer a funny person, maybe I lose my sense of humor or whatever, then the friendship probably wouldn't survive, because if the basis of the friendship is is the pleasure or the utility that it can provide the friend, then yeah, then it probably wouldn't survive, if I stop being funny or if I stop being of any use to that person. Um, and the same is true of all kinds of business friends, friends that you make in business as well. Maybe if that one could argue that if that person ceases to be, if maybe if that person goes, yeah, if that person goes bankrupt, then maybe the friendship would dissolve, because if the rich guy goes bankrupt, then then the poor guy wouldn't be able to get whatever benefits he's getting from the rich guy anymore. Um, so although things are actually more complicated than that. Sometimes uh, you do see cases of friendships which survive, even if one person goes bankrupt, or even if one person becomes totally different person, loses his sense of humor or whatever. And it seems that if the friendship somehow survives, if people continue to be friends, even if one person goes bankrupt, then that means that will indicate, that will imply that there must be something else going on in the friendship. I mean, something going on in the friendship that does not depend on wealth, and does not depend on whether I'm a funny person or not. Um, So, uh, so then we come to, if that is the case, then that means that the friendship is that means that the friendship is no longer based on something as coincidental or as well or as pleasure. And I think Aristotle would suggest that perhaps in this case you might have a friendship that is based on something, based on something like virtue. uh, okay, so what is a friendship? What is a friendship that is based on virtue? Um, so a friendship that is based on virtue, very simply is when one person who's virtuous, who practices the virtues, when he gets to know somebody else who is also virtuous, and then they basically, they see in each other a sort of a like-minded soul who are into the same things, practicing virtue, and so he thinks that this is the best kind of friendship because it is based on the stable state. The idea being that if you are a virtuous person, you are committed to, you know, we said last week, right, that if you practice the virtues, the more you practice the virtues, the easier it is, the more pleasant it is to continue to be virtuous. So if you are virtuous, chances are you will tend to remain virtuous throughout your life. And and so if you make friends with somebody because you recognize that you guys have a shared interest, shared inclination towards being virtuous, then that is very different. That's very different from making friends based on wealth or pleasure, because wealth comes and goes, pleasure also comes and goes, but virtue tends to kind of stay stable. So if you make friends based on virtue, then that is something that tends to stay stable, and which means that your friendship has a much better chance of surviving and lasting. Now, he also says at one point, I'm not fully sure. I'm not to be really honest with you. I'm not fully sure I understand what I'm about to say. But he also says at one point that the advantage, the good thing about another good thing about friendships that are based on virtue, is that it is immune. It is immune to slander. Um, I think the idea is that friendships based on virtue are immune to slander because if you are friends, if you are mutual friends with somebody because they because you each recognize each other to be virtuous, then then you will trust that person because you will trust that person to be somebody who's reliable and who will speak the truth. And the same goes the other way around. He or she will also trust you to be somebody who's reliable and to speak the truth. And slender appears. Slender happens because one person spreads malicious lies or gossip about somebody else. So, so if you if you are friends with somebody because of virtue, then there is a kind of how to say this, that there is a kind of unspoken agreement that you won't spread malicious lies or gossip about each other, and therefore it is and therefore a friendship that is based on virtues is immune to slander. And maybe that's also another reason why it's more more stable and more likely to last. Because I'm sure you know that a lot of friendships, a lot of relationships and friendships they often break up or come to, or dissolve because of gossip or slander, right? One person thinks that the other person is spreading all kinds of lies about him or her, and then that leads to a lot of bitterness and unfriendliness, and then the friendship dissolves. So yeah, I think that there's also yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense now. Yes, so that's another reason why friendships that are based on virtuous tend to based on virtue tend to be more stable and tend to last. Um, okay, thoughts, comments. Okay, let's see. Um, let's see if the people on Zoom have any thoughts or comments. Okay, any thoughts and or comments from those of you in Zoom? Okay, let's see. Uh, okay, here's something else that is interesting. So one reason, right? So the first one reason why this friendship based on virtue is the best friendship, best kind of friendship is because it is in a stable state. Uh, Another another reason why a friendship based on virtue is is the best kind of friendship is because if you think about it, this kind of friendship, the friendship that is based on virtue, it actually includes it also includes a kind of pleasure and utility in its own way as well. Um, it's a it's a different kind of pleasure and a different kind of utility. So remember that we said last week, right, that if you are a really virtuous person, you will take pleasure in being virtuous. Practicing virtuous activity, doing the right thing, is actually very easy and pleasant for you. And so I would imagine that sometimes if you are by yourself, if you are by yourself just doing virtuous things on your own, I would imagine that it can get a bit lonely. So if you have a like-minded person who also does virtuous things along with you, and you can, I don't really have a lot of virtuous friends, so I'm only trying to, just trying to imagine what it would feel like. Maybe what happens is that you have somebody whom you discuss. You will meet with your friend. Okay, yeah, the idea, the other interesting thing he says, sorry for the digression, the other interesting thing that he says is that friends, like-minded friends will tend to want to live with each other. Um, I'm not sure why he would say that. Maybe in the old days, in during his time, if you are if you are a virtuous person and you are a person of independent means, um, you probably don't have to worry about going to work every day or something, and so you probably spend a lot of time, pursuing activities of leisure, and it would make sense that it would make sense that if you are not wanting for anything, it will make sense that you would probably want to have friends to do things together with. Um, Let me just read this to you to make it, to make it more clear what he's saying. So he says, those who welcome each other but do not live together will seem to have goodwill rather than friendship. For nothing is as proper to friends as living together. For while those who are in want desire benefit, blessedly happy people who want for nothing, no less than the others, desire to spend their days together, since a solitary life fits them least of all. Okay, so the idea is that if you are virtuous and happy and you do not and you want for nothing because you are independently wealthy, then you probably the only thing that would make your life more complete would be to have somebody to spend your days together with. Um, and so therefore, if somebody is your friend, you probably should want to live together with him or her. And if you are independently wealthy, that probably shouldn't be a problem because I imagine that you probably have a nice house and then you can just like maybe put your friend up in a guest room or something. So okay, so I was going to sorry I was going to say something about this and then I got digressed by this whole by the whole living together thing.
Is it is it living together like living in the same house together, or is it like living together like, oh, like every Tuesday or something we go spend this time together like a dog kind of
Like
thing?
they're just
Yeah, like they're living like good,
They're
hanging
roommates.
out on the weekends, or they
Yeah,
like when you're a little kid and you go to your best friend's house like every day or something.
maybe yeah. I mean, okay, so he doesn't go into the details, but I'm imagining that. Maybe it seems to be, I don't know, I mean, okay, I mean, I want to say that, it's more like the second version, the second option, which is that you go play golf every Tuesday or something. Um, but, but if somebody is your friend, if somebody is somebody you have so much in common with, you would want to see them probably more often than just every Tuesday, right?
Yeah, that was just the first thing that my
Yeah. I was reading this passage, and the first thing that came to well, one of the first things that came to mind, because I'm kind of pessimistic, when it comes to these kind of things. The first thing that comes to mind is, if you spend a lot of time with somebody, you're bound to you're bound to find things with a person that really annoy you, right? That's just how people are. I mean, it doesn't matter if he's your favorite person in the world. So, so it seems like it's almost like if you have a good friend, a friend that's based on virtue, it feels like you should probably establish boundaries, so that so that you don't end up spending too much time together and annoying the hell out of each other.
That's his good neighbors.
Hmm?
That's his make good neighbors.
Maybe, yeah, good idea, good point, good point. Uh, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe Aristotle is like, maybe he doesn't get irritated easily. I don't know. Um, but so the idea is that, well, if you don't get irritated easily and you are a person of independent means, then you should want to spend as much time with your friend as possible. Therefore, you should live together. Um, and the idea is that sometimes it gets lonely if you're practicing a virtuous life by yourself. So if you have a friend whom you can see every day, and at the end of the day, you can get together with him or her and talk about what you have done in your life today and such. Um, it's like a companion, perhaps. It's like a companion who walks with you on the path of, virtue. And so it's actually pretty cool. I'm just being again, being the pessimistic person I am. I'm just wondering, isn't he going to annoy you at some point? But okay, maybe Aristotle doesn't have that problem. Yeah. So yeah. And then yes, and so that actually is the. I was going to say that there's a second reason. Yeah. So the second reason is that besides being a stable state, besides being a stable kind of friendship, you also get pleasure out of it. This is a different kind of pleasure from the kind of pleasure you get from somebody who's a jester or anything like that. This is a pleasure you get from somebody who understands you, somebody who understands your virtuous life. And I guess you could say that there is a kind of utility involved as well, because there's a sense in which the two of you are using each other to maybe help each other to become more virtuous, and and that person, as I mentioned earlier, that person serves as a kind of mirror. Um, Both, in a way, I guess that he can be a mirror in two ways, right? First, he's a kind of mirror that reflects to you, reflects to you the life that you are leading, and basically makes you feel more confident in your own values. I'm sure you have noticed that, friends tend to, well, there's that saying, birds of the same feather flock together. So, I'm sure you have noticed that when people are friends, unless there's some big disparity in wealth or whatever, otherwise, when people are friends, they tend to choose friends who more or less have the same values as them. Uh, so, yeah, I think the reason why people do this is because, you choose friends for a rather, I don't want to say it's selfish, but it's a little bit selfish. You choose friends for a rather selfish reason. That is, you choose friends to reinforce your sense of who you are. Uh, you know, so yeah, so if you have certain political views, you will choose friends that will probably have many of the same political views to help you to reinforce your belief that your own political view is correct. So in that sense, right, a friend is like a mirror to you because he reinforces your sense of self. Maybe he boosts your self-esteem. He boosts your self-esteem in that way. And of course, the friend can also be a mirror in another way, by serving as a kind of maybe a feedback loop. So if you end up doing something that is not consistent with your values, that person might call you out for doing that. Uh, so and that's kind of why it's important. As we saw earlier, he says that if you have bad friends, you probably won't be happy. So it's if you are a virtuous person, it is important to have friends who are virtuous as well, because otherwise, it will be very difficult. There will always be this constant temptation to not be virtuous, because your friends have such different values from you. So yeah, so there is a there is a kind of, as I said, there is a kind of pleasure and a kind of utility involved in being in having in friends of virtue. It is not a simple kind of pleasure that comes from enjoying somebody's jokes, but it's more like a pleasure that comes from walking the virtuous path together. Um, yeah, sometimes I think I'm just wondering. Uh, if you are a virtuous person, it'll be nice, right? I mean, you probably, it'll be nice if you can find one or two one or two friends who are virtuous like you, and those people are your friends, are the friends that you make based on virtue. Um, but now I'm wondering, would a virtuous person continue to, continue to make other kinds of friends, based on utility or based on pleasure? It seems that the answer should be yes, I think, because I don't know. I mean, uh, if you are a virtuous person, you might still need to have business associates, because you might still need, I mean, even if you are independently wealthy, you might still need to conduct certain kinds of business relating to your estate or whatever. And then maybe the attorney who's managing your estate might be kind of a friend in a way. Uh, and then the attorney who's managing your estate doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to be a virtuous person. He may or may not be a virtuous person, but you still might be a friend. You guys might still be friends. You guys might still go to dinner or whatever together or lunch. So in that, and so it'll be more like a friendship that's based on utility. Um, and maybe another example might be, if you are a virtuous person, you might still, perhaps you might still watch movies and do the other things that regular people do, and then you might make friends who are in the entertainment business, and so that would be, and those friends, I would think, would probably be friends that are based more on pleasure, than on utility, or based, yeah, more on pleasure than on utility or virtue. Hmm. Very interesting. Okay.
Is with this virtuous friend and a virtuous person, do they have to have every virtue? Because I feel like a lot of people have some virtues and not other virtues.
Yeah.
And so like they'll have, if they're like a really a service, like a very kind and serving person, they might have other friends that also like do kind and serving things with them. But then if they also love name that sport, so they've got their sport buddies that they go to all the games or matches or whatever with. Like, would that work?
Oh, okay. So is it possible to have a friend who is virtuous maybe in one way, but not in other ways? Uh, Actually, that's a good question, and it actually touches on a much more basic question, and the basic question is it possible to be virtuous in only one way and not in all the other possible ways? So, for example, is it possible for me to be a courageous person but not moderate? Uh, feels like, I mean, from our sort of common sense modern point of view, it feels that the answer is probably yes, right? Because you see a lot, you do see people who, you see like Marines, right, who have distinguished themselves, earn all these medals for bravery and all that, the Purple Heart and all those things, but then they drink too much. Um, so, this is somebody who would presumably be courageous, but not very moderate. Um, um, you see, the thing is that the reason why I'm so hesitant right now is because Aristotle has this. It's not just Aristotle, but most of the Greek philosophers have this view of virtue. They call it the unity of the virtues, and the idea is that all the virtues, are really just one. They are just part of one big virtue. So, so you know, so I think the big virtue. One way to think about it is to think about being wise, think about wisdom. So if you are if you are courageous, being courageous is a kind of wisdom, because well, because it means you can think of it as a kind of wisdom that translates to knowing the right thing to do on the battlefield and doing it and being able to do it at a crucial moment, right? Uh, and same goes for moderation. Moderation is also a kind of virtue because it kind of, it's a kind of wisdom. Moderation is a kind of wisdom because it translates into, again, it translates into knowing the right amount of food to eat or the right amount of drink to drink and actually being able to, do it. And then you can imagine that you can, so basically virtue is, if you want to have a sort of grand account of virtue, virtue is basically is basically having the wisdom to know what to do in a particular situation and being able to do it. All the virtues they kind of boil down to this. So now, if you come back to the to the Marine, right? He seems to have the wisdom to do the right, to know what is the right thing to do and to do it on the battlefield. But he doesn't seem to have the wisdom when it comes to knowing how much to drink and to eat. So if he has wisdom in one area of his life, but not in another area of his life, does he have virtue, or does he not?
I feel like it just depends. Like if he is drinking and people would see that as not being virtuous, what if he knows that he's not supposed to do that, but he chooses to do it anyway? Does that make him not have virtue, or does it make him?
It makes him. Remember the discussion we had last week about the four kinds of people, right? Let me take a picture of this first before I write a few more things on the board. Okay, so you might recall, you might recall the discussion we had last week about so we were talking about the four kinds of people. There are the people that are virtuous, right? And these are the people that that do, I'm going to say, do right things easily and with pleasure. Okay, and then there are the vicious people. These people are, they probably just don't know any better because they had a bad education. So they just don't do the right things. They do wrong things. They do wrong things because they are ignorant, out of ignorance. And then there are people who just, they do the right things most of the time, but they are only able to do it by forcing themselves. So they do the right things. And we call these continent people, but not easily, but with effort. Okay, and then okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the last kind of person that we're talking about are the incontinent people. And these are the people that, they know the right things. They know what is the right thing to do. But they somehow fail. But fail to do it. And very often when we see such people, we will say they fail to do it because they lack willpower or something along those lines. Okay, so maybe the Marine we're thinking about is in this situation is incontinent. He knows that he shouldn't drink too much, but he drinks too much anyway. So it would seem that well, if you go with this whole classification, it would seem that Aristotle would say that, that ultimately the marine is not virtuous. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. I know this sounds like a really harsh thing to say, but it doesn't matter if he has distinguished himself on the battlefield and done all those wonderful things. He is ultimately still not virtuous, because his there is at least there is at least one area of his life in which his wisdom doesn't work properly. He knows the right thing to do, but actually doesn't do it, but fails to do it. And yeah, so and I do realize that's kind of a harsh thing to say of people, um, because he probably he might very well be a better person, better man than I am. But yeah, but the idea is that remember the idea is that it's almost like virtue is it's kind of an all or nothing kind of thing. You, if you are virtuous, you have to be somebody who's virtuous in all areas of your life. If you are virtuous but only possess some characteristics of virtue, like if you're only courageous but not temperate, then you then you're probably lacking in virtue, which means that you're not, which is another way of saying that you're not virtuous. Um, so the idea is that again, right, unity of the virtues. All virtues are basically one big virtue, and so if you are lacking in one area, then that means that you know you well, if virtue is a ball, I don't know if this is a good way to think about it, but if you think of virtue as being a ball, and if you think of courage as being one part of the ball, and the moderation as being another part of the ball, and justice as another part of the ball. So if virtue is a ball, then if you are unable to practice one of the virtues, then you don't have the ball.
But who's to say what these things are? Like they might not agree that one of those things is virtuous, so they wouldn't follow it, And to them, they're still being virtuous. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the Marine might say,
it's fine to drink so much,
Yeah.
That's what his thought might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, so he will be disagreeing with Aristotle, which is okay.
Or to go along with that, that could also be like using justification for it. So like, oh, I have PTSD, I'm going to drink to deal with that. Trying to use justification over virtue.
Yeah. Mm. So but I mean, there is an easy answer to what you just said, right? And the easy answer would be, the easy answer is not always the right answer, but there is an easy answer. And the easy answer would be, I don't know. I mean, if you have to guess, isn't it better to like go get some help rather than self-medicate?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So I mean, how do I say this? So the thing is this, right? The thing is that we can try. So very often when we do something that is maybe not virtuous, we can try to justify our actions, and but not all it seems that not all justifications are created equal, because I mean, if you say that, suppose you say that, okay, so suppose I'm on battlefield and I couldn't save my buddy from being blown up because maybe I was too far away and I couldn't get there quickly enough to save him. Now there is one justification for why I couldn't save him, and that's the idea. The reason is because I couldn't physically get there fast enough. But if you say that I couldn't stop drinking because I PTSD, that's a different kind of justification. Justification. It feels like a weaker kind of justification, because it's not like you physically. I mean, you do have the resources to help you to stop drinking, get help. Um, yeah. So not all justifications are created equal. Some are better than others. Uh, but coming back to Carson's point, okay, so suppose you disagree with Aristotle and you say, what are you to judge? I mean, I drink a lot, I drink too much, but I mean, you might say something like, but I get on okay with the rest of my life. I don't beat up my wife or kids. I just stay by myself in my room when I'm drinking. I still go to work 3 days, right? So I might, I'm probably damaging my liver, but that's my problem. Um, and this, other than drinking, right, I've lived a pretty good life. I have a pretty successful career, and I distinguish myself as a Marine and all that. So what's the problem? Yeah, what is the problem? Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just gonna say, but isn't judging or at least proposing ideas on how to self-judge the whole point of philosophy and ethics? Like, yeah, we could always say, who are you to judge about? But I don't believe in this ethical idea, which is totally fine, but then it kind of defeats the purpose of the discussion.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing about ethics and moral theory in general is that a lot of it is about judging, making moral judgments. Um, okay, Carson, let me ask you a question. So,
Please don't.
no,
go ahead.
okay. Imagine you are in the position of that person who's drinking too much. When you reply to Aristotle, are you actually saying there are two possible things you could be saying to Aristotle. The first thing you could be saying is, look, you are wrong about virtue. I'm actually a virtuous person. You probably don't understand that sometimes drinking too much can also be a virtue. So you could be saying to Aristotle, look, you are wrong about virtue. Virtue. I'm actually a virtuous person. You are wrong about drinking being a bad thing. Okay, so that's the first thing you could say to Aristotle. That he's wrong about virtue. That you're actually a virtuous person. The second thing you could say to Aristotle is, I don't care. I don't care if I'm not a virtuous person. Uh, the even if I'm not a virtuous person, I seem to be living well. The drinking too much doesn't seem to hurt anybody. So even if I'm not a virtuous person, I'm still living well. So who needs the virtue anyway? Uh, so which one which one is closer to what you are thinking?
The second.
Okay, okay. So in that case, it seems that if Aristotle is making a judgment on you, that if Aristotle is judging you for not being virtuous, you are basically saying, I don't care. I don't care if I'm not virtuous. I don't care if I'm not virtuous. So we get that. Which brings us to a bigger question, which is why uh, uh, why should people care about being virtuous in the first place?
Is that to me? Because I'm haven't really answered.
Oh, no, to the world at large. I mean, the class at large. Why should people be virtuous?
I feel like people, we kind of like what we said earlier on in earlier discussions, like we have absolute value. We are respectful beings. Like if you aren't virtuous and you don't have value, then how can we be intellectual or intellectual beings?
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I mean, that's assuming that you do need to be virtuous in order to fully be a rational being, something like that. And not, again, not everybody would agree. Not everybody would agree that. Uh, I feel that, I think the reason why Aristotle would think that drinking too much is not virtuous is because, you know, uh, most of us modern people would think that you can basically treat your body very badly and still be virtuous and still be living well. Uh, uh, so remember that the word virtue comes from the word, originally the word virtue is more or less the same as excellence. So if you are living virtuously, then you are living excellently. Uh, and so Aristotle is kind of different from us modern people because we think that it is possible to live excellently even if you treat your body like shit, horribly. Um, but Aristotle doesn't think that way. I think, it seems that if you read Aristotle, you will get the sense that he thinks that taking care of the body is a big part of what it means to live excellently. Uh, and it kind of makes sense from his point of view because the idea is that if your body uh, if your body is the thing that you use to do things in the world, then if you are not taking care of your body and your body is in bad shape, then you wouldn't be able to do things in the world, and therefore you wouldn't be able to do things accidentally. Uh, uh, Whereas, we moderns, we don't think it that way necessarily. We, I actually don't know what we think about bodies. Maybe we think about bodies as just this thing that you can do whatever you want with. But yeah, so because of that, Aristotle would say, I think that's why he thinks that treating your body badly through non-moderation is not virtuous because you are not behaving accidentally. Yeah. Hmm. Mm,
Just to the broader question, like why should you care about virtue and stuff? I don't like if virtue is just living excellently, then you don't have to care about virtue. It's just if just Aristotle or virtue ethics is like if you are virtuous, then your life will be better than if you're not. And so it's like if you want to just improve your life, then acting virtuous is one of the ways to do that. And it's a way that you can control because most other things outside of yourself are just they happen. Like you can't control the weather or unless if you're a certain powerful person, you can't control whether or not that your country's at war or there's so many things you can't control other than like, who you are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And something you said just now that was very interesting. I was thinking I was going to say something about it, but I can't forgot. But yeah, the idea is that, oh yeah, yeah, okay. So the idea is that, if the goal of human life, if the goal of human life is to flourish and live happily with other human beings, um, then chances are, if you do things that are bad for your body, like drinking too much, then chances are you wouldn't be able to live well with other human beings. Um, and I suppose there are exceptions. Uh, you, there are people who drink too much and still continue to function. So perhaps Aristotle would say, look, sure, you can function and you can drink too much and still function, um, but wouldn't you like to be able to function even better? Not maybe not dependent on something in order to get through the day. Wouldn't that be more excellent? Um, and if you have the option to be more excellent, why not do it? Maybe if you think about it in this way, oh, maybe, maybe what Aristotle is doing is when he talks about virtues, it's not really making a judgment in the sort of Kantian way, right? Kant would say, oh, if you don't do this, then you're not doing the duty form. Uh, but maybe what he's saying is that, look, here are some, if you want to live a good life, here are some recommendations. And the recommendations they all involve virtue. And so if you don't follow those recommendations, then you might be missing out on some aspects of happiness or whatever. But it doesn't condemn you to be a horrible person necessarily. Hmm. Yeah.
I just thought when you said that, it's like no one condemns an animal for being an animal or like a baby for being a baby, or even like just if you just act the way that your nature holds you, no one thinks that you're a bad person. Well, some people think.
Yeah. And so he says that, and remember he says somewhere, I should have read the passage, but there's no time now. He says somewhere that virtue is not something that we do by nature, because we're not by nature virtuous. Babies are, pretty selfish by nature. But we all have the potential to become virtuous if we, train ourselves. So the idea is that, yeah, so maybe you're right. If you don't train yourself and you remain in that baby-like state, I don't think it means you're evil. It just means there's a whole bunch of potential that you haven't fully actualized. Okay. I guess I do need to let you go because it's time. Okay, thank you very much. This I'm going to expect it. Because yeah, it's actually a very intricate chapter. Okay, I'll see you guys next week, and we'll watch the parasite. Thank you.